It was. Well, a lot of people that came here should be.
Well, if you guys have any questions, we'll answer them at the end of the lecture here. I want to thank you for all coming. My name is Wesley Smith, and I don't normally dress this way. But, now I don't look crazy, but I want history to come alive for you. I am here to take you on a journey through the U.S. money display. Now, the display features the fractional currency series put out by the government in 1862. Now, what's unusual about this is the only time in history that you could put this note on an envelope and mail it or buy your next meal with it. Now, this series is called the fractional currency series, but the very first issue was actually called postal currency. The reason for this, we did not, or the government did not produce currency yet. The Constitution had no provision for the government to produce paper money. So, what happens here, you have in the second issue, that's when it becomes fractional currency. But fractional currency had occurred once before. And you can see during the Revolutionary period. This second issue is actually the first currency that the government produces. Now the thing is, you might ask, why did we need this? Or why did this happen? If it wasn't for the Civil War, this would have never occurred. As you can see, like with this coinage here, because the government did not act fast enough, businessmen started putting out, at first, they would put out like IOUs or paper currency. But then, people really didn't like paper. They wanted more like coinage. So at the top here, you can see the Indian head penny that the government put out. And then there's 10 Indian head coins that businesses put out. Now with these tokens, they call them tokens, there are a lot of different things that were put on them besides the Indian head. Now, with this second issue here, what happens with this panel, you can see that before 1862, anybody, they called it the wildcat banking era. You could have, pretty much anyone could produce paper currency and put it out. The government was not doing it at this time like they are now. What's special, excuse me for a moment. What's special about this note, it is dated March the 4th, 1861, from Washington, D.C. Does that date ring a bell with anybody? You know what happened on March the 4th, 1861?
Fort Sumter?
Close. This was actually the inauguration of President Lincoln. What's fascinating about this is the vignette. It's actually a train on there. How do you think Lincoln got to D.C.? It was by a train. Yes. So, more than likely, this note was at the inauguration. Somebody probably went to a bank with $5, they got change, they wanted to buy something. So, and the other thing with these notes, they're almost like contracts. You have how much, you have a date, you have the person's who's going to be getting the note, and then also the clerk and the president of the bank. Now, most contracts are put up, and you never see them. But this, they come alive. They actually are in your pocket, and they start walking around, so it's kind of unusual, but they are like a contract. This note is dated March the 14th of 1861. It's practically about 40 days later this note is kind of special. This is when the gentleman was saying Fort Sumter, it was actually being turned over to the South. 2 days prior to this is the first battle of the Civil War. The battle lasted about 34 hours, and what's cool about it, there was no bloodshed. No one died on that first battle. Now, while they're turning the fort over, there's a 40-gun salute. And during that, one of the batteries exploded, killing one that day, fatally wounding another. Now what's interesting, 4 years later, to the exact day, President Lincoln fell to assassin's bullet. This next panel is dated in 1792. And what's interesting about this, they talk about a legend where Washington actually took his silverware and produced the first half dime. They didn't call them nickels. It was almost like dies-me is what the word is, but it was a half dime. What I was questioning is why would Washington do this? So you start thinking about it, he realized for a country to be sovereign, it has to produce its own coinage. So almost a year before the mint begins, he puts this out. So to me, this is a sacrifice for his ideals. This next panel shows from 1793 our first issued pennies. There's about 4 different ones, also a half a penny. Now, this down here is our first dollar. Now, if I ask you, what is the color of money? Does anyone know the color of money? Oh, now, green money, don't we want green money? The thing is, has it always been that way? Has it always been the color of money as being green? Prior to 1862, the answer is no. So it asks a question here, which one is counterfeit? So just think about green money. Now, if you ever heard of greenbacks, it's the same thing. It all starts with that $1. Now, with this here, what's interesting, this is from a song cover. And you'll see the allegorical figure that that Lincoln is made to look at, which is war. But in this display, Lincoln, I think he's Washington, but Lincoln, he is actually able to look at peace. Because that's what he really wanted. He didn't want war. Now, with this panel here, this is the 3rd series of the fractional currency. And what's interesting about it, you'll see this gentleman right here. His name is Treasure Spinner. He's on the 50 cent. There was a problem in 1862. As we talked about, there was no coinage. So when you went to buy your milk and your cheese and your butter, they didn't have any coins to give you. Well, it's his problem. So and this is our stamps from 1862, and above it, you'll see that our stamps began in 1847. And this is a proof of those. So he's sitting at his desk. He asked for some paper. And what he does, he takes these stamps from 1862, and he starts putting them on the paper. And he puts 5 of them, 5 cent, which is 25 cents, 5 10 cents, or 50 cents. And when you look at this, you can see he just simply took our stamps, put them on a piece of paper, and made these notes. Now, what's interesting about the 3rd series, this gentleman on the 5 cent, his name is Clark, Superintendent Clark, of the newly Currency Bureau, the National Currency Bureau. Now, the story goes that Congress wanted a Lewis and Clark on the money. Well, I guess Clark didn't hear Lewis, so he puts his image on the 5-cent piece. Now, you got to realize, Congress flips out. They think, oh my God, we have this lowly government employee on our money, because at this time, it doesn't matter. You can be alive and be on our money. So they make a ruling on April the 7th, 1866, that no living person can be on our money. Now, the unusual thing is, about 4 months before this, actually about 2 to 3 months before this law was enacted, this is it's called a Grant and Sherman. It's a 15-cent piece. This 25-cent, which is the Secretary of Treasury, Fenton, and Treasurer Spinner. What happens like I said, about 2 to 3 months before, the 25-cent and the 50-cent is put out before the law is enacted. But what happens in that period of time, the Grant and Sherman is pushed off to the side. It's almost like scrapped. Well, you have to realize this is less than a year from the Civil War. These are the people's heroes. So when they put these on, they could see what was going on. So there was a great unrest within the Treasury. So it is said that they took, and at this time they're unifaced. They have the face on one sheet and the backs on another sheet. So it is said that they are taken from the Treasury and they're glued together. They're cut out to represent, because they felt that between Sherman and Grant and God, that the war was won. It was over. So when they cut these 3 notes out, it was to represent the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, in this pamphlet right here, on the back 3 pages, will tell more of the story of that. But it talks about, by midnight's hand, they rode the great steed down into the south to finish the great deed. So they raised a prayer before these were distributed into the south, that all that had fallen would not be forgotten, that brother would not fight brother evermore. And then they say, to the journey's end, that they shall rise from the south to ride again. So that's kind of interesting. But like I said, on the back 3 pages, you'll see this here. On this panel, this is called the money shield. If you would go into banks, post offices, any place of money exchange, you would see this. Now, it didn't go over very well. But if you notice that you'll see the Grant and Sherman notes on here. So I wonder, to appease the people, the unrest in the Treasury, if they let these remain. Now you have to realize these were never circulated. So when you look at this, if you believe these were circulated, it's an impossibility, because the government never released them. Now this panel here is the 4th and the 5th series. Now, you might wonder where you guys come into the story at. About 3 months before I found this note right here, I met a wonderful woman that changed my life. And she works here. And she told me about you guys. And she told me how Hendrix started in 1876. And that impressed me. I thought, that's pretty good. 11 years after the war, here in the South, a college begins. So I knew at that moment that um, the display would have to be here at Hendrix first. Now, as I was doing my research, this note, about a year later, I find out that the fractional currency series ends in 1876. So that's really when I think, okay, the first time that this is going to be displayed will be at Hendrix. Now, so what I do is I arrange to have it displayed, and I always get the day before and the day after. In 2012 was going to be, on August the 21st, 2012, was going to be the 150th anniversary of the release of this note. So when I got here, I put the display up. Come to find out, the next day, August the 21st, was the first day that Hendrix was going to begin in 2012. So I thought that was very unique. So that's why we're back for the graduating class of 2016. Because the way I look at it, we're both graduating. This display is finally finished. The thing is, the story does not end there. After Hendrix, I go to the Faulkner County Library here in Conway. And I asked them to display it, and they said, sure. So I come back in about a week. Well, the Daughters of the Revolution had placed a copy of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So I went ahead and I laid with Lincoln in front, and my display on this side and their display on that side. Well, I went over and I began to look at it. Now the thing is, this is what Lincoln saw, and this is what I normally have seen. That day, this is what I saw. It was actually a readable copy of the Declaration of Independence. And I began to read. And I read that all men are created equal. When I read that, I realized the greatest accomplishment of President Lincoln is when he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. The thing was, it did not end in a period. There was actually a comma after that. Now, you have to realize that Lincoln was fulfilling what the founding fathers wanted. So as I read on, and like I said, it says that all men are created equal, comma. So it didn't end the thought. When the thought started, and it says that they are endowed by their Creator to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When I read that, I went home and I wrote this, which you can see it was on the Declaration. Now, I had a 17-year-old young man read this. And I wanted to know his input. After he reads it, he tells me I left something out. I thought that was interesting. I said, well, Mark, I said, what did I leave out? He said, a title. Okay. After reading it one time, I said, well, Mark, what would you call it? At this time, I would like to read this to you. And this is Mark's title. I gotta get one more little drink. This is his title. A Declaration of Truth. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were the principles this country was founded upon. These principles hinge on one factor. Life. Does it not equate to a job? For if you have no job, you have no means to create a life. If you have no job, you have no liberty. If you have no liberty, you have no pursuit of happiness. A job gives a person a sense of being, a purpose, a reason to wake up each day to press on. It defines who you are. Ask yourself, if I had no job, or I wasn't going to college, where would I be right now? Would you have life with liberty? Do not give your brother a loaf of bread, but instead give him the means to feed himself and his family. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is just one job away for all. Lincoln fulfilled what the founding fathers wanted. Can we? Now, I have a story about poor Abe. Now, poor Abe lost his job. I have a question for you. Whose problem is it if Abe don't have a job? Is it Abe's problem, or is it our problem? Now, like I said, Abe lost his job. He's went through his unemployment. Rent is due. And there's a mortgage on the house that he's living in. Who do you think is going to pay for that mortgage? That's right, the landlady. Now, unfortunately, the landlady has a mortgage on her house. Now, how much stress did we just put into the landlady's life? I call this the domino effect. Okay, Abe's feeling pretty bad about himself. So what's he do? He goes out and he gets drunk, spends all the money. He comes home, little woman goes, Abe, kids need food. What's Abe do? He goes down to the butcher, steals some food. Another domino effect. Next day comes, guess what? Kids are hungry again. What's Abe do? He goes back down to the butcher. But this time, he's arrested. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time. Whose problem is it? That's right. It's our problem. So, to keep Abe in prison or jail for 1 year, it is going to cost us $30,000 to $40,000. Now, let's not forget about Abe's legal expenses, tying up the courts, lawyers. That's another $20,000. $60,000. And now let's not forget about Abe's 3 kids. We're going to feed them. We're going to give them medical. That's about another $40,000. We're up to $100,000. The kids are living in squalor without a father. Think about that for just a minute. $100,000. We're spending billions on this side, and what are we doing for our next generation? Living in poverty. The question I have for you, what if we simply give Abe a job? At least the kids will have a father to raise them. Before Abe loses everything, what if he could go down to the state? One day he might be painting a park bench. The next day he might be cutting up wood. Now, the thing is, what I want to ask from you guys, I made a website called creatingjobs.info. And there's a sheet back there when you leave. I made a presentation. It is entitled, How Can Everyone Win by Creating Jobs? I would like you to go there. It takes about 15 minutes to read. But while you're reading, ask yourself, will it work? And then make a comment and put it on social media. I don't know nothing about that, but put it on social media. Make it go virus or whatever you guys call that. Now, the thing is, there's some of you that's going to step up and go, I can make this better. That's where the $1,000 challenge comes in at. If you can make it better, make it better. Now the thing is, let's say you do this and you don't win the $1,000. But let's just say you put 100 people to work. 100 families will be eating. That is worth more than the $1,000. Now, in this presentation, anyone that's going to go to, that are law students, you will see there's 2 sites that I do, and it's to the preamble of the Constitution. And I know the courts aren't very hip on the preamble of the Constitution, but you have to realize these are ideals. This is what we're trying to obtain. So the articles, the amendments underneath support our ideals. Now, when you're on this website, you will see that I want to go to the White House, but it's not to be president. I want to give the president viable options on putting our men, our women, our veterans, and even our prisoners to work. You want to do something about the recidivism rate? Give them a job before they ever get out of prison. Don't send them back to their impoverished streets. You'll also see on this website that I want to give this display to the president and to all that follow. That way they will keep the people's interest at the forefront of their mind. And when they look at this, they will remember the people who have come before us, the Washingtons, the Lincolns, and even the unknown. Now, many have asked me, why this president? Why not the next president? Let me ask you, or let me ask the president. Hopefully one day he will see this. I would ask him, who does he owe? Because to be president, many people believe you're going to owe someone. I would tell him he owes no one except for the people. Where do you go from here? To write your memoirs? I want him to be able to write in his memoirs how he helped millions medically and saved the country billions. We all know, or excuse me, it is a known fact that marijuana has a medical purpose. But how is it scheduled? It has no medical purpose. This it shouldn't be. It needs to be rescheduled. That's what I would ask him to do. Reschedule it and put it into the hands of the doctors. Now, to you guys, voice your opinions. Go to this website, voice your opinion. So let us see if we can change the world around us. I want to thank you. And if there's any questions, I'll go ahead and take those right now. Hopefully I didn't bore you. Yes, sir.
Are these actual copies of these copies of the notes, or are these the actual notes?
No. These are the actual notes. The stamps here are from the 1847. These are proofs. So they would do those first, look at them and say, okay, that's what I want, and then they would run them. Now, the only things that are not genuine are these coins here and these two coins here. Because you have to realize, either they're poor shape or there'd probably be about $1 million sitting right there in that town. So I went cheap on it. So, you know. Yes, ma'am.
How long did it take you to collect all of these?
Actually, I started in '09 and I found that first note. So, any other questions?
What is your motive also?
Do I not?
What do you want to achieve except giving this to the president? What do you think would be more of like you say you're giving back,
Yes.
but if you give this to the president and he doesn't act, or if you give it to anybody in power and they don't act, what is
Yes.
your way?
The
What
thing
are you
is,
trying to do?
that's a great question. If you saw, a wise man once said, if you saw a blind man getting ready to walk off a cliff, would you tell him? If they do not listen, if they want to continue on to go off the cliff, then so be it. So, that's why I have an alternative motive. To me, getting jobs, getting the president to do something might not work. But this is like a sacrifice. Because I look at Washington and Lincoln. This runs about $30,000. So it is a sacrifice for them to do something different. That's why my alternative motive is the marijuana. I work with people that have cancer. I have one lady, her face is, she says it's been cut off. Really, it was reconstructive surgery. The second time is because the medicine she used ate into the metal screws. She lives in this state. She is a criminal. Not really. So, that's what I'm here for. Any other questions? Okay. I appreciate all coming. And like I said, this will be here till Friday at 7 o'clock. You can view it. And I'm glad that you guys came. So, are you guys glad you came?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh.